All right, last but not least is the mastering chain. Starting with Pro MB here, this is pretty much just going to control the low end, so the kick, the snare, pretty much those frequencies here. The reason why I wanted to do that is probably as I started mastering and making things a lot louder, especially with the clipper and the limiter, it probably made those snares and the kick hits come out too loud. And then next, Soothe. Actually, it's hitting the vocals pretty hard, but usually when I mix the vocals in, I would rather them be a little bit too loud than a little too quiet. So this kind of fixes that after the fact. And then Saturn. Saturn's kind of a subtle change. The upper mid-range as well as the high end, kind of frying it just a little bit and kind of gluing it together rather than having everything kind of be a little bit hi-fi and refined. So the guitars and the cymbals and things like that start to merge a little bit more. And then I've got an EQ. It's adding about 1.5 dB of brightness around 10K. I guess I needed the cymbals to sound a bit louder. It's also rolling off some of the low end, so kind of keeping a control on the sub frequencies. And then Gullfoss. My favorite thing about Gullfoss is it kind of feels like it's just unmasking everything. So I usually build, like I said earlier, a darker, sort of thicker mid-range. And when I bring Gullfoss in, it kind of unmasks some of those mid-range frequencies and makes the upper mid-range and the higher frequencies a little bit more polished. And then I've got a clipper, and this clipper is pretty much going to be doing what I showed you with the drum clipper, but on a less crazy scale. So it's going to be clipping all the peaks, but this time it's also going to have strings and vocals in there too. So everything's going to get a little bit more fried on each hit, but it's going to tame the loudness so that when it goes into a limiter, the limiter is not pushing back all the transients and making it sound more compressed. The impacts are going to come through and it's going to sound, rather than a rubber band kind of slinging back all the hits. Yeah, so the clipper's doing about 3 to 5 decibels of clipping, which is less than the drum. And I'm going to say it's pretty much hitting, and it's pretty much clipping whenever the drums or the vocals are going crazy. It's not making the vocals sound terribly trashy, but it is definitely going to make it an easier job once it hits the limiter without having to do too much crazy rubber band stuff. And then that's all going into a limiter. Something I find kind of interesting is vocals are so loud, so when you have them on a chorus and you see the limiter hitting, the limiter is going to be hitting that so much more. Whereas, as you saw in the breakdown, the limiter isn't doing nearly as much. It's really just doing most of the transients. The mid-range with the guitars and the bass aren't as loud as the vocals are. The way I usually like to set up my limiter is to set it up during the chorus when everything's loud, and then I can change other elements during the breakdown. Like if I would just want to automate the input for the limiter to be louder during the breakdown, that way the instruments are as loud and hitting that limiter, but when it goes back to the chorus, it's not too loud and it's absolutely destroying the vocals. And one last thing, almost forgot to mention it, is master automation. So this is something that I'll do to make different parts hit louder and also to make sure your fade-ins and fade-outs sound good without any weird clipping stuff. So at the very beginning, usually at least a bar, I'll have a fade-in. I'll automate that so it goes from 0 all the way up to whatever amount you're going to do. Sometimes I'll have it go straight to 0 decibels volume, which one would consider to be the ceiling. And sometimes I'll have it go to -1 decibels if I want the intro to be quieter than the rest of the mix. But I'll show you my first automation choice that I would take. So here, I want the break to be 0.2 decibels quieter than the rest of the sound, and that makes it so when the chorus hits, which is 0.2 decibels louder, you'll really feel the 0.4 decibel change. And then I'll continue that for this break, which is going from 0.2 back down to negative 0.2. And some of the bigger changes I'll have is when the breakdown goes to negative 1 decibels for that break, and then right before the chorus, which is going back up to 0.2 decibels. And then I'll add another fade out just for the last beat. So that's pretty much the mix and master. I'll play a little bit more just so you can kind of hear it. As always, thanks so much for watching. If you found anything interesting, please let me know in the comments below. I'm really curious what you guys have to say. Please be sure to check out Endlessly on streaming and save my profile so you don't miss the next banger coming in late July. And here's the music video if you want to check it out.